Hey, good evening, everybody, to episode 122 of the Standing 8 podcast, live streaming on Thursday, March 7th, 2025. I'm Aaron Sorial, 1/6 of the Standing 8 podcast crew. You could also follow my boxing photography content on Instagram, Risk Visual, spelled RYSK Visual. Also with me is one of the usual suspects, Courtney the Burp Brown Sugar Tanner, patching in from abroad. It's always an honor and pleasure to share the airways with you, talking that shit on boxing. Last but certainly not the least, we also have special guest panelist, reoccurring collaborator on these Boxing Talk episodes, Gary Kittilsen of 3D Boxing Blog. He is also known as a boxing bookie for his in-depth betting analysis on upcoming fights on YouTube. So be sure to check him out on YouTube as well at 3D Boxing. So yeah, let's get straight to it. Waste no time on this. On the first topic of the agenda, giving our breakdown reaction to last Saturday's WBA lightweight championship between defending champion, 3-division champ, boxing star Gervonta Tank Davis and challenger Lamont Roach Jr., who moved up from super featherweight where he is the WBA champion. So obviously, the trending hot topic out of that fight has been the sequence of events in round 9 surrounding the knee Tank Davis took, in which many people considered, myself included, a knockdown. As we all saw, ref Steve Willis at first briefly started the count as if it was a knockdown, but stopped at around 2, I believe, to give Davis the opportunity to explain his side, claiming he needed a pause to clear what he claims to be hair gel dripping down his eye, impeding his vision. Putting aside that sequence of events in round 9, overall, I scored the fight 7-5 in favor of Roach. With or without the 10-8 round 9, I would have still had Roach winning on my cards. Obviously, a 10-8 round would have been the difference maker on the official scorecards, as many other scorecards from the viewing public in favor of Roach. A very competitive fight, but clearly, especially from round 7 onward, from my viewpoint, Lamont Roach was not only able to counter whatever Tank threw at him, he also followed it up with additional combinations. And for the first time in a while, I haven't seen. You barely see this. We saw Tank Davis at times on the defensive, fighting backwards. Whatever the power that Roach lacked in power, he made it up with his counterpunching, his activity, and irritating Tank Davis, especially the second half of that fight. So, Gary, give us your thoughts about that exciting match, especially that round 9 sequence of events.
All right, so there's no controversy. That's a knockdown. Like there's no debate. It's a knockdown. The ref missed it, but he didn't because he started counting. Look, Steve Willis has been around a long time. He's a highly respected ref. New York Commission, at least in the United States, is kind of like the gold standard for commissions, and he's their best ref. I don't know what happened. I'm not going to cry corruption because I don't have any details. But there's nothing controversial about it. You take a knee, that's a knockdown. It is what it is. Like if you watch boxing for more than 6 weeks, you know that, right? Like Steve Willis definitely knows that for sure. It's not going to get overturned on the appeal. I know Lamont Roach appealed it. It's not going to get overturned. All right. I don't know why Steve Willis didn't rule it a knockdown. It ended up being the deciding factor in the fight because you had a majority draw, meaning if he gets the 10-8 round, he gets the extra point and he wins. Lamont Roach, even though I had it 7-5 Tank on my card, okay? I was watching it. I had 7-5 Tank. I was watching with a good friend of mine who had 7-5 Roach. It was that kind of fight. It's an evenish fight. Mm-hmm. The knockdown was the difference. If they roll a knockdown, Roach wins. And he's got considerable beef because, like I said, there's no controversy. That's a knockdown. It's a knockdown. It's a knockdown on Monday. It's a knockdown on Tuesday. It's a knockdown on Saturday. It's a knockdown any day of the week. And Steve Willis knows that, which is why he started counting. What I don't understand, also, what isn't discussed is that Calvin Ford, I think it was, got up on the apron and wiped the gel out of his eye. That's automatic disqualification. You can't get up on the apron. So there's more to this than that. Steve Willis never called timeout. Like if you drop your mouthpiece, they call timeout. They send the other fighter to the neutral corner, and they call up your trainer. You can't just jump up on the apron. That's an automatic disqualification, which is what happened. There's a lot to this. Again, I'm not saying it's corruption. I have no evidence to suggest it was corruption. But it's hard for me to believe that Steve Willis just dropped the ball like that and didn't know that was a knockdown after he started. And he said to him, "If you take another knee, I'm going to count it a knockdown." It's like I don't understand anything that happened in that sequence. And unfortunately, it was a difference in the fight. It would have turned a draw into a Roach win. As far as Roach's performance, I thought he pitched a perfect game. Right? I thought, like, in order for him to win this fight, he was going to have to do exactly what he did. He's going to have to stand in front of him, spot, trade, get out of town. And he did that to perfection, right? Especially in the second half of the fight. In the second half of the fight, where I had him winning most of the rounds in the second half, I had Tate carrying most of the early rounds, and I had Roach carrying most of the later rounds. His confidence was growing. I was like, all right, this is where he's going to get knocked out. He's going to throw one too many combinations. He's going to leave himself open to be countered, and Tate's going to take him out with a left hand. It never happened. Roach fought a beautiful fight, and if they fought again, I may pick Roach. This was not like a Buster Douglas thing or a George Kambosos thing where it's like, okay, he can never replicate that performance ever again. I kind of feel if they fought again, it would look a lot like this, but Roach would have the confidence from the early going. So if they rematch, which I think they will, I'm kind of favoring Roach.
You know, before I go to corner, going back to that sequence of events in round 9, as it pertains to Steve Willis, I've always thought that once he started counting, he should have never counted. Like, whatever Tank Davis is saying, he should have just disregarded it and continue counting. Like whatever the reason that made you take that knee, you voluntarily took that knee no matter what. And categorically, that's a knockdown. So just want to add that point there. Corny, your thoughts, man? Go ahead, man.
Man, listen, I think when most of our audience pulled this up and saw it was me and Gary on here, we were going to spar. But as far as I'm concerned, man, the first thing that came out of his mouth is there's no controversy. We can move on from there. Because I'm in complete agreement. The only thing I'm not in agreement with Gary about on this is the corruption aspect. He said that, he's not going to call corruption because he doesn't know the facts, and I don't either. But this is the thing: there doesn't have to be ill intent for there to be corruption. Corruption could be incompetence, and that's what this was. And then aside from the New York State Athletic Commission saying that they were having a technical issue and they couldn't run back the replay. Get the hell out of here, yo!
That's ridiculous.
They have this shit on VHS. Are we doing the replays on VHS in a highly digitalized streaming era? They could have grabbed somebody's cell phone and ran it back. Like, come on now, that is just bogus. That explanation from the New York State Athletic Commission was completely weak and asinine. We as boxing fans, we as the public, we cannot be satisfied with that explanation from the New York State Athletic Commission. And the thing is, Gary, he said they're the gold standard of boxing, and they have been for a long time. But the thing is, they've been showing their ass lately. When you look at Ryan Garcia testing positive for PEDs, and then them going ahead and letting them fight anyway. Like that's like the New York State Athletic Commission is doing a lot of sparring, and they're going a lot of rounds in the court system right now. So if they're the gold standard, they're definitely not showing that. In terms of the fight and how I viewed it, if we're not talking about the knockdown that obviously got taken and obviously should have been scored, I think that was a difference maker because I had a 6-6 either way. And that was supposed to make the difference for Lamont Roach. So I rarely will get on here or get on social media and say there was a robbery or saying there was a fix or whatnot. But I mean, Lamont Roach was definitely robbed. He has every right to feel robbed, as they showed him on that walk of shame back to the dressing room, which shouldn't have been one. But I was just completely gutted for him, man. That was completely bogus. That was complete bullshit. And in terms of how the fight played out, is Tank Davis got found out. And I've been on various shows for years. I've taken a lot of heat from his increasing fanboy nation that as special of a fighter as Tank Davis is, he is defensively liable and has been for years. And the thing is, he shorted up. He shorted up as of late. But the thing that Gary pointed out that he demonstrated in the ring for all to see is that he cannot fight off the back foot. And that's where Lamont Roach kept him that entire night. And he didn't, he didn't. I'm not going to say he didn't have any success off the back foot, but he wasn't able to transition off the back foot and take the fight forward on a consistent basis towards Lamont Roach. And I think that was the difference maker, and that's why I saw it as being 6-6. I think Tank Davis landed the more consequential blows in that fight. I think when he got off, he was crispier. But in terms of Lamont Roach, as far as ring generalship, and in terms of him, the flow of the fight being where he was comfortable and he wanted to go, that was all Lamont Roach. And this is the thing, is when somebody has good footwork, when somebody is crispy, and then when somebody is flashy, the thing is you keep a jab in their face all night. And if you do that, they're not able to do what you want to do, what they want to do. They're not able to go where they want to go. And that's what we saw from Tank Davis. And if you stick the jab, eventually they're going to do what you want them to do, and they're going to go where you want them to go. And that's what we saw. That's what we saw from Lamont Roach, where he was bossing it in there as the fight went on. And Tank Davis obviously came out flat. And he came out of that. He got it going in the middle rounds. But yeah, I think with that knockdown, that should have been the difference maker. It should have been counted. People who are casuals or who don't follow boxing regularly as people like us do, they'll ask me questions like, yeah, who's the best ref in the game right now? I tell them Steve Willis is one of the best refs. And then a lot of casuals, because it's Tank Davis, are tuning into these fights and these events, and then they're looking at saying, I got a white egg on my face. It's like, yo, what was that? So it's disappointing that when boxing is on the big stage and boxing has these rare moments in the mainstream, as it does with fights like that, we as hardcore boxing fans, we look stupid. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is like, hey, if this is an unhealthy obsession for y'all, like, why? You encounter any meth addict or heroin addict in the street and see them pushing the needle, and you're just like, why are you doing that? Why are you putting that poison in you? Why are you killing yourself? And I think that's how casuals are looking at hardcore fans right now in boxing. It's like, yo, why do you go hard? Why do you put yourselves out there with all this passion for a sport that completely comes up short and keeps doing you like that? And we'll tune in for it to do us like that again, because that's just us. But yeah, man, listen, unless you are completely in Tank Davis's lap, you saw that for what it was. And I would say 80% of Tank Davis fans are like, yeah, that should have been a knockdown. Like Gary said, Steve Willis had all the prerogatives to start that count and to continue it, and then he could have relied on replay later on to overrule him. And if they were having a technical difficulty and they couldn't pull a stream up on the fight, then that would have stood. And then I think there would have been a very few outliers who would have been saying, well, that should have been counted, because they're going to take any excuse that Davis gives them with I got grease in my eyes. Overall though, however way you crack that, Tank Davis got found out. And I'll say this, and I said it in some group chats after the fight, that listen, if Lamont Roach took Tank Davis there, if Isak Cruz took Tank Davis there, Shakur Stevenson is going to make him look silly.
Going back to Roach, and Gary already alluded to this. Can Roach take him there again and more in the rematch? What do you say, Courtney?
I don't, honestly, the way I see it is, if a rematch occurs, Lamont Roach, because of who he is and the pride he takes into that matchup and that rivalry, with it being DC versus Baltimore, with him feeling he got robbed, and that the officials and the judges didn't see it for what it was, I think he's going to go in there with a head on chip on his shoulder and try to take it to Tank and step to him, and I think Tank Davis knocks him out.
I could see that, right? Like, kind of like Marquez with Pacquiao in the last spot. Like, Marquez was not going to let that thing go to the scorecard. Like, it was going to end up knockout one way or the other. I could see Roach doing that, and that would not bode well for Roach. But, like, part of me sees it the other way. Roach fought such a disciplined fight. Like I said, he threw a perfect game, right? It's like trying to pitch to Barry Bonds. Like, you got to be perfect. And he was. Like, if he was that disciplined, I think he'll stick to it in the rematch. And I think the confidence that he grew in the second half of that fight will just carry over in the first half. If they had a rematch right now, I don't care what the odds are. I would say take Roach.
And also too is you got to look at Tank Davis. You know what I'm saying? I've just excruciated him. But this is the thing too is I call it for how I see it. I call it for what it is, not what I want it to be or what I think it is. And the thing is, I will never go on record. I'll never go on wax and say that Tank Davis is not a credible boxer. I'll never say that Tank Davis is never a skill dude. I've always seen him as more than a clubber. I've always seen him as more than a bully in there. So I think Tank Davis is capable of making adjustments. I think Tank Davis is capable of boxing. So I think he can make adjustments too. And if I'm looking at both of them stacked against each other, say as far as boxing ability, I cannot say in good conscience that Lamont Roach is the better boxer. I just think he fought the better fight on that night.
I mean, that's fair because just because a boxer is particularly good at one aspect and we're used to seeing him do well in that aspect doesn't negate the fact that he can't do other parts in his arsenal. So that's a very fair statement from Cornian. Great thoughts from you, Gary, as well. But yeah, great breakdown of this fight. It's gonna be, should that rematch happen, it should be very interesting. But let's go to the next topic of the agenda, which is the Cinco de Mayo weekend of fights. So there's going to be 3 events: Friday, Saturday, Sunday of that weekend. May 2nd is the New York Tripleheader card featuring Ryan Garcia versus Roland Romero. Then you have Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza Jr. and also Devin Haney versus Jose Ramirez. Just for my initial thoughts going in, the fight I'm most looking forward to, as far as having the most meaning behind it, substance, is the Teofimo Lopez versus Arnold Barboza Jr. fight. Mostly because I have that Cali, biasing me because I want El Monte being represented from Barboza Jr. Grinding his way up to at least to get that interim title to face Teofimo Lopez. But that's the most fight that I'm looking forward to. Although you have high-profile fighters in Garcia and Haney with their respective matchups. But Gary, give us your thoughts about that New York Tripleheader card, May 2nd, happening Cinco de Mayo weekend.
It's cool. It's in New York. It's in Times Square. It's cool. It's a cool event. It's a great card. And that's the fight to watch. Ryan, if he comes in and he takes this halfway seriously, he'll knock out Rolly. He's got the best punch in boxing, which is his left hook. And if Rolly's got one of those chins where if you tap it, it cracks, right? So Ryan should win that fight, assuming Ryan takes this halfway seriously. The interesting fight is Teo, because Teo is so much more talented than Barboza, but Barboza is one of those guys that just kind of knows how to win rounds. And then the next thing you know, you're behind on the scorecards, right? And Teo has a habit of getting frustrated and sloppy, and he's kind of temperamental. Barboza's got, I don't know what the odds are on that fight yet, but Barboza's got a real shot to win that fight on points. I think Teo is going to get frustrated and is going to get to the point in the second half of that fight where he's going to need a knockout. Can he get it? He might be able to. He's explosive. He's got great power in both hands, so he might be able to get it. But Barboza is just really, really good at putting rounds in the bank. Like, you look at him, there's not a whole lot to him, but he hits his angles. He can win rounds with his jab. Like, he's just a tough guy to fight if you get behind on the cards. And Teo's got a history. Go watch the Sandor Martin fight, right? He's got a history of kind of getting over anxious and loving his power and explosiveness a little bit too much. But Barboza's a live dog in that fight.
Awesome, Gary. Corny, let's get your thoughts on this triple header card in New York on the Friday. the Friday leg of that weekend. Go ahead, Corny.
Man, if you're a boxing traditionalist, if you're one of those guys like my boy Roy Bennett, who loves going back through the archives and looking at those old fighters and looking at those old cards, if you're one of those guys who likes watching ESPN Classic and looking at those fights that are on the reel, with the cracking visuals that have to be digitally restored in black and white, no commentary and shit like that. This is a throwback to that, and I love it. Hey, shout out to the Sheik, shout out to Ring Magazine. I think this is where they're asserting that they are going to be the supreme authority in the sport, promotionally, television wise, as far as just an authority on boxing. I think this is where they're trying to make their bones, and they're doing it in a truly iconic manner. In Times Square, going old school with it is, not looking for a stadium, not looking for an arena, not looking for an event hall, but going to the people, going to the streets, going to a heavily populated area, shutting it off, and putting a ring up. And having people come in standing room only at some places to watch the fight. I think that's going to be a beautiful event. That's going to be a beautiful venue. That's going to be a beautiful moment for boxing. And I think that's going to be one of those things like we used to see the fights on the West Coast at the old StubHub Center, where a lot of us were contemplating if that was an ancient Aztec burial ground because the fights were always intense. The fights were always bangers. I think it's going to invoke that into those guys who are stepping in between those ropes and in that ring. I think as far as the fights go, I think the intangible on that card is Devin Haney and Jose Ramirez. I think Teofimo Lopez and Ryan Garcia were allowed to more or less pick I'm not going to say gimmies, but they were allowed to pick the showcase opponents, more or less. I think Devin Haney has a real dog up against him and Jose Ramirez, man. I think that fight is put on is like, all right, these are 3 showcase fights where they all have a path towards each other or towards something greater, something forward. I think if anybody has the greatest potential to get caught looking ahead on an opponent, it's Devin Haney with Jose Ramirez. If him putting pen to paper on that contract, that shows that that he still, he still thinks he's that dude. Where I think a lot of us have questions is where is he at mentally going into that fight? Because if he's anything less than on point, Jose Ramirez, he not only tips over the apple cart, but I think he blows it up in that fight. Teofimo versus Barboza. I like Teofimo from a skill standpoint. If I stack those two against each other, in my mind, from a skill wise aspect, it's not very competitive. But Barboza is a dog in there. But Barboza does come out clean on the other side of some very vicious fights and some dust ups. And I think the intangible in that is what Gary mentioned or he touched on is the event we started out talking on the undercard of that. We saw a ghost in there in the name of Sandor Martin, a guy who after Teofimo fought, he questioned his father if he still had it. And I think that's ironic. And I think if there's any of that ghost that lingers in there with Teofimo against a guy like Barboza, it's going to get hairy in there. And then the first fight, Ryan Garcia, Rolly Romero. I think a lot of us have seen that back and forth on Twitter between the two of them, and that statement where Ryan Garcia said, "Rolly, you only made this card because you're a funny guy." And basically you're bringing the entertainment aspect, but otherwise I'm gonna kill your ass in there. And I think that rings true. I think if anybody has a walkover, it's Ryan Garcia. With him being out as long as he has, and going through his issues, I think he the people who are organizing this fight feels he's owed that. It's whatever. If anything, though, I think a lot of us we like to see Rolly Romero on a card or in a fight because we like to hear what he's going to say, and we like to see how much garbage he's going to eat. when he's in that ring. So I think that's the intrigue on that, and that's what makes the Ryan Garcia Rolly Romero fight one to watch. So definitely looking forward to this card, and looking forward to the fights on that.
An add-on comment to add on to your comment, especially with Devin versus Jose Ramirez. Definitely, I see it could be overlooked, that fight as well. Because Jose Ramirez, he has nothing to lose. I'm sure he's going to give it his all. And I think he's going to depend on the notion that, Haney, he might be overlooking him. And Ramirez, I think he's going to depend on that, on that aspect of that fight, that, hey, Haney could get caught again, as he did against Ryan Garcia. Maybe Jose Ramirez could duplicate that same good luck on his side. So that's another, roughly 50-50 matchup, all things considered, between Haney and Ramirez, when you also compare it to Lopez and Barboza Jr. So that's going to be the May 2nd New York tripleheader of that Cinco de Mayo weekend card. Now we go to May 3rd. We got Canelo Alvarez versus William Scull, taking place in Saudi Arabia. William Scull, the current, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, he's the IBF champion in super middleweight. So Canelo Alvarez he's aiming to, complete that undisputed status again, to get that IBF again, take that IBF title away from Scull. Gary, give us your assessment of that fight, and enlighten us about William Scull, to us in the audience, if you have any tidbits that we don't know about him. I know he's a Cuban. He has that Cuban style that Cuban style that always gives Canelo fits. But any more to it than that?
No, I mean, I think you pretty much hit it on the head. William Scull is a good fighter. I'm not trying to disparage him. And I know Steve is listening, and I don't want to call it a cherry pick because he does have a world title, right? So I get why he's making the fight. But William Scull is a guy, if I ask boxing fans, you guys probably know, but if you ask hardcore boxing fans, name 2 people he's beaten, you can't do it, right? You can name Ashishkin, and then you guys would be searching for most boxing fans would be searching for another name. So he's just not a guy that most people know. Yeah, he's got that typical Cuban style. He's a good athlete. Yeah, he can give Canelo fits for a while, but he does have a tendency to drop his hands and stuff, and he's going to get caught. I think Canelo probably gets a stoppage in this fight, if he's not shot. I think we're going to find out a lot how much left Canelo has. If he's anywhere close to the Canelo of old, he should get a stoppage in this fight, because he's going to get hit. And he's got a good jab. He's a conventional fighter. He's not southpaw like a lot of Cubans. I don't see how he lasts the distance in this fight, although it may be entertaining in spots.
Awesome, Gary. Courtney, you're back with us. Give us your initial thoughts, immediate reaction to Canelo Alvarez versus William Scull, for William Scull's IBF belt and the super middleweight division. Go ahead, Courtney.
I mean, I'm just gonna be real. The way I see Scull is he's a Cuban fighter, defected to Germany. That's where his career has been based. I mean, easy to see him as a German club fighter, European regional level at best, not a world-class guy. When the fight got announced, it makes sense from a standpoint of, I think with Canelo having this matchup in the fall with Crawford, he's trying to get the rest of the Infinity Stones together, the rest of the belts, so it can be an undisputed fight. I think that's what Crawford was promised upon signing for that fight and making the event happen. That it would be for a chance for undisputed at 168, and Crawford having a chance to go for undisputed in a unprecedented three weight divisions. But in terms of scope, when the fight got announced, my mind immediately went to the guy that Canelo fought in Miami a while back, Yildirim. Yeah, that's basically it's going to be the Sheik is probably going to put on a great event, some great intros, probably be a pretty cracking undercard. the production value of what they put on in Saudi has always been top rate. But if you buy that fight, just prepare to be interested in something on the undercard other than that main event, because that main event is not going to last long. If Skull goes beyond 3 rounds, I'll say he acquitted himself very well in that instance. But
I said 5 or 6. So you're giving even less credit. Okay.
To me, it's levels. It's levels. And Canelo is arguably an all-time great. Is undoubtedly a first ballot Hall of Famer the day he hangs it up. And in the face of the face of boxing globally. And the reason he's the face of boxing, first and foremost, is because he's at that skill level. And experience-wise, it's not even close to who has the best resume of all active fighters right now. So I mean, him bringing that to bear in the ring against a dude like Skull is just going to be completely out of his depth in there.
Great assessment from both regarding that fight. Canelo Alvarez, William Scull, May 3rd. Also, the last leg of that Cinco de Mayo weekend. Now, it's official now. May 4th, Naoya Inoue coming to Vegas. It's been a while since he set foot on U.S. soil, but he's in Vegas May 4th, Sunday, versus Ramon Cardenas. Gary, your overall thoughts, impressions of Naoya Inoue coming to Vegas to defend his undisputed super bantamweight championship against not much known number 2 ranked WBA ranked Ramon Cardenas. Your thoughts, Gary? Go ahead, man.
Ramon is a good friend of mine. If you check out my Texas Boxing channel, I got a bunch of interviews with him. He's a really good friend of mine. He's trained by Ronnie Cantu and Joel Diaz. He's from San Antonio. I don't want to speak badly of him. Here's what I would say. Any showing where he accounts for himself well against Inoue is good for his stock. He's been close to a world title shot at 118, where he was ranked number 2 by the WBA when Inoue was a champion there, and then Inoue went up to 122 and he followed. So he's been wanting this fight for years. That's my point. He's going to get what he hopes for. He's going to get what he wishes for. It's a career-changing opportunity. He's going to get a lot of money for this fight. He's a good offensive fighter. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. He's fought on Pro Box a bunch of times. He's fought on ShowBox. He's a good offensive fighter. He's got all the tools. Does he have the tools to be a Inoue? Probably not. But he's really good offensive fighter. He's got good speed, two-fisted power, defensively responsible, a guy that likes to fight up the front foot coming inside. The only question, he's a big dude, right? The only question is, at a certain point, does Inoue start to fade, and is Ramon Cardenas just too big at that time, right? Because Inoue is a guy that started at 108, right? One of his first started at 108. Fighting at 122, that's a big difference now. Like that's a lot of weight. So the only question is, can Cardenas catch a fading Inoue who's now fighting out of his best weight class? That's kind of his best shot.
Very interesting. Gary, Corny, do you agree with that assessment? Could we?
With Gary knowing Cardenas, I'm not into disparaging people, especially when I haven't tuned in and I don't really know the breadth of their work. So I'm gonna say it's not personally disparaging the dude. I'm just I'm just disappointed they couldn't find in a way a bigger name. That and Gary, maybe you can help me with the pronunciation. The guy man, there's another guy who's highly rated at 122. Name starts with the A.
Let me pronounce for you, Corny. Akhmadaliev, right?
Akhmadaliev. Yeah, that's who that's the name that was being floated, and that's who I was hoping that he was going to have a chance to lock horns with and feature for him to come back to Vegas. But we know boxing, we know the business of boxing. So it could be a situation where money didn't align. A person as highly rated as him was probably wanting a little more money to fight headline in Vegas against a guy like Inoue. And I think Top Rank just probably they were trying to find an opponent that was going to be more economical as far as with the money they're having to give out. Also, with the rumors out there too, is that Top Rank and ESPN will soon be parting ways as far as their television partnership and stuff like that. Maybe the pot of money that ESPN was willing to allot to this fight wasn't there, for whatever reason. Hey, we got the guy who we got. As far as how I see that, like I said, I'm not really all that familiar with Cardenas, but I'll say with guys who are lesser known, Inoue is a guy who usually comes in and likes to take care of business quickly. He's not Inoue. I think the reason a lot of people have fallen in love with him is he's not a guy who plays with his food. He gets in there and he eats. And so I'm looking for this to be more of a showcase. And Inoue comes in, handles business very quickly, and basically generates that interest for people to tune in and to wake up early to tune into his next fight. And I think he's being positioned to where that fight or being aligned to fight Junto Nakatani in that huge matchup over in Tokyo. So I think I think this is like a fan interest generation fight, and just another opportunity to bring Inoue back in front of U.S. audiences in Vegas. The last time he showed up and he fought in Vegas, it was during the pandemic where they were in the bubble, didn't have a big live audience for that fight. So I think Inoue, rightfully so, feels kind of robbed of his Vegas American experience. So I think he kind of wants to get that one back in terms of being able to come and fight in the States. So, but either way, Inoue is one of those guys. You can tell me he's fighting a circus clown. I'm gonna tune in to see that because it's Inoue. And he and that's a testament to where he is and where his trajectory is and his importance and his significance to the sport and to the culture right now. Is he's one of those guys that he's on TV. You're gonna want to tune in to watch. If anything, maybe the chance of the fight being competitive is not there. But we know we're going to see a great finish and a great effort out of Inoue. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
I wanted to kind of add one thing. It's a rumor. It's not been confirmed. I don't have confirmation, but it's been circulated around the internet that friend of the program, Eddie Vasquez, will be fighting Rafael Espinosa in the co-main event on that card. That's not confirmed. Okay. That was just something that was floating around the internet. Awesome. He was supposed to have another fight, and this rumor leaked. I don't know how much truth there is to it. But I've seen it on multiple sources that Eddie Vasquez of Fort Worth will be fighting on this card.
That's good to know. Shout out to
I'll say this. Shout out to Texas, man. Texas and Texas boxing culture and the Texas gym scene, they are up right now in the sport of boxing. So definitely. Like, hey, and you can see that on the bevy and the quality of interviews and guests that we've had on this program, and the expansion of our fan base and our followership as a result of that. Just shout out to the state of Texas, shout out to the gym scene, shout out to all the amateurs down there, shout out to all the youth centers, the PALs, and everybody on the ground and grassroots level that have just that has made Texas boxing what it is right now. I think they're carrying, as far as American boxing and the American boxing scene. And when you look at the American boxers who are holding titles right now, and the American boxers that are talked about right now, it's that Lone Star State, man. It's something in the water down there. And I say this as a quintessential Californian. You got gotta tip the hat to the state of Texas. Because they are definitely up, and they're definitely they are infusing the American boxing scene with air right now. So wherever you at, stand up and applaud for that. Most definitely.
To add to that, Corny, and I like that too. And even more to your point, this may not even be evenly cyclic. It might be Texas for a while representing nationally for America. So. And I'm down with that too. and I'm saying this me from Cali, so I don't
Yeah.
mind saying that because I'm like you, Corny. I'm seeing it the way I see it as well. Texas, they're doing their thing out there and they're representing, especially on the global scale. Now that recently we had Bridge Ortiz representing Fort Worth out there overseas, doing this thing against Madrimov. So shout out to all the Texas fighters. Word up, straight up. Before we end it, I want to get your
I
guys'
appreciate
thoughts.
that, guys. I mean, I'm usually the one that has this.
Oh, go ahead. Hey, you know what?
I appreciate
Respond
that,
to our
guys.
compliments.
You
Respond to
made
our
me feel like
compliments,
the
Gary.
bad papa right now. I appreciate it, guys. I do.
For sure. Now, before we end it, I want to get you guys' thoughts on this new. It's official. Dana White, Turkey Al Sheikh. They had this big press conference announcing a new boxing league of their own. My feeling I'm getting from it is that it looks like they're making it like on its own, separate from all the established entities that we've grown accustomed to. It looks like they're promoting as building the next breed of champions. You're going to see more champions from our side, but the thing is, they don't have any big names signed yet under this new yet to be named company. So, Gary, let's get your thoughts on this partnership. How do you what are your thoughts on this? How do you see this coming about? How will it how will it intersect with the sanctioning bodies of the WBC, WBA, the major the major championship bodies out there right now?
So I got like mixed thoughts on this. Like these two egos, how are they really gonna work together? Right? Like these are two massive egos. Who's gonna submit to the other here? Like that's like problem one. But the positive I see here is like they got a lot of money. They have a lot of money. So like the fighters will follow the money. Like Dr. J went to the ABA because they offered him a lot of money, right? Like Jim Kelly went to the USFL because they offered him a lot of money. If they offer fighters a lot of money, they will follow suit. They will go fight for them, and these two guys are gonna have a lot of money. I don't have a lot of information. I'm kind of like where you guys are. The news surprised me. I was trying to read up on it as much as I can. There's not a lot of information to be out there. Look, it's got potential to be great if it doesn't implode, right? Like I think there's potential here to grow the sport. You're gonna have a lot of money interested in the sport, and you have Alex Sheik, who clearly loves boxing and likes making big fights, interested in the sport, which is good. So there's a lot of good, but does it pan out? I really don't know. There aren't a lot of details. Boxing is a mess currently. I got more questions than answers for you, Aaron. I mean, I wish it could be more of a help, but I just don't have a lot of answers right now.
Fair enough, Gary. Courtney, your thoughts on this announcement between these two?
This is the thing about boxing, and this is the thing when you delve into the business of boxing, especially as it relates to the networks and how boxing is broadcast and boxing is viewed. We can sit here and we can have a discussion on this press conference and the relationship between the Sheik and Dana White, but often more times than not, what you got to do is you got to look at the periphery of what's going on. So with that, I really don't know. I really don't know, and it's really hard to speculate on what the Sheik and Dana White have going on or what they're planning to do. In relation to that though, what I'm gonna look at and wait to see what plan pans out is what's gonna happen with Top Rank if in fact the word on the street that them and ESPN are done. And then what's gonna happen with PBC if them and Amazon Prime agree to dissolve their union that they got going on. Because it seems there's we got DAZN streaming, and they're the primary home for any matchroom fights, now Queensberry fights, the unaffiliated guys who are kind of like the free agents who are not signing with the promotional company, but they're ambassadors with the Sheik. And then you got guys from Golden Boy. And you do have the outliers with PBC and Top Rank where they got that. Now, if PBC and Top Rank don't have homes, where do they land? Where do they end up? Right. If they end up on DAZN, then I think what Sheik and Dana White got going on becomes very relevant. If PBC and Top Rank are still remain outside of that umbrella on the zone, then if they're plotting a promotional company, if they're plotting a boxing league, if they're planning to bring boxing under UFC's purview or whatever, that's going to have less of a significance. I think the only way we really are, the hairs on the back of our heads need to stand up with those two getting together, is if PBC and Top Rank find themselves homeless. And the thing is, if Top Rank is not going to remain on ESPN and PBC is not going to remain on Amazon Prime, where are they going to go? So those are the questions I think we got to wait to be answered before we really go into hoopla in terms of Dana White and the Sheik starting a league or starting a new promotional company. But I think if I'm asked to speak on how I feel or what I think is in the mix with those two, is I think what could be very possible is they're making a play to delegitimize the four sanctioning bodies: the WBO, the IBF, the WBA, and the WBC. And I think with good reason. I think even the most traditionalist of us, I think the most hardcore fans would all universally agree that there are two things there are too much of abundance of in boxing right now, and that's titles and that's weight divisions. And if you look at what UFC has done with their little piece of combat sports, and they're whittling it down to very specific weight divisions, with them having only one belt, with them having scenarios where the champion has to fight the next guy up. I think that's where their success model has come, and I think that if them working together, whatever entity they develop, I think it's going to be very much built on that model, in terms of trying to push boxing or mold boxing into something where it can come back to the mainstream. And I think the only way boxing really comes back to the mainstream is if there's less divisions, there's less weight classes, and there's only one fighter and one name in every division. So whether whether that's going to be easy for them to do, or how much success they'll have in doing that, I don't know. And I'm not. I don't have a lot of faith in that they'll be able to do that holistically for the whole sport of boxing, simply for the fact that boxing is such a global sport, and it's very hard to implement something into 180 different nations, and within those 180 nations, multiple governing and sanctioning bodies within those. Boxing is just inherently fragmented, and so for them to basically parse something down and consolidate it, that's going to be a very tall order. But I'm excited to see what can come about of that. So,
great thoughts from both you, Courtney and Gary. It's from all getting at, the formation of this league will most likely definitely come at the cost of something else. That's the feeling I'm getting at. That's gonna wrap up episode 122. Great talk. Courtney the Bird Brown Sugar Tanner, Gary Kittilsen of 3D Boxing Blog. I'm sorry. Before we end it tonight, Gary, any lasting thoughts, shout outs, or do you want to shout out any local, grassroots fighters from your area that you want to mention on episode 122? Go ahead, Gary. The floor is yours.
No, but give my boy Ramon Cardenas, good friend of mine. I've known the kid for years. Give him a shot. Like, go see if he's got plenty of fights on pro boxing. You can take a look at him. I'm not saying he's going to beat Inoue. That's a tall order for anyone who's ever lived, right? Like, that's a lot to ask for. But give him a chance. Like, give him a fight. He's a fighter. He's legitimate. He's earned this. So give my boy Ramon Cardenas a look. And also, guys, just thank you for having me on again. I appreciate it. And thank you for the kind words for the Texas boxing scene. I really appreciate it.
Definitely, Gary. Courtney, the Bird Brown Sugar Tanner. Go ahead, man. Any lasting thoughts, shout outs? Go ahead, man.
Yeah, in terms of shout outs, with this thing we got going on and with this movement, it's extremely hard for us to have the full band together. all the time. And so we're just blessed when we can get schedules aligned to get one or two gathered or assembled in order to bring you guys content. So with with that said, hey, I know a lot of people are just in love with a lot of personalities. We're rightfully so that we have on this show. So that's why we're honored to bring back Gary. Always held in high regard. Always a fan and crowd favorite, and for good reason. The man just knows what he's talking about, and his points are just so concise each and every time the dude opens his mouth. So thank you, and thank you for just remaining humble enough to keep us humble in what we do here and what we provide, man. And just a shout out to everybody else on the panel. Shout out to you, Aaron, for basically, like I always say, just giving us a beautiful canvas for us to paint this masterpiece on. Shout out to Tommy Rush. Shout out to the First Lady of Boxing, Tiffany Daniels. Shout out to my boy Steve Ruiz. Hey, we haven't locked horns in a while, but I got all the sympathy and empathy in the world for him in balancing a busy work life and a beautiful family and his own entity, which he has, trying and basically trying to put things out there. But we'll have him back on soon, and I'll be extra tough on him when he gets back on because I know y'all love to see that. Shout out to Michael Gomes doing his thing out of Jersey. Hey, he will be back soon. That's just another one who's got a lot going on outside of this program. Shout out to D-Rock. Is in semi-retirement from the podcast, but is always with us in spirit and is always with us behind the scenes, providing input on just how we can make things better and how we can just stay legit and stay relevant in this game. And just basically shout out to everybody who has collaborated with us and continues to rock with us worldwide and from all over the space and this entity in which we present content and just bring you the best of what we have. We love y'all, and we just hope and pray that you can keep on rocking with us, and we can expand in 2025 and 2026 and beyond to keep bringing you guys premium and premier content in the sport of boxing. We love y'all. Thank you for loving us.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And thank you for that. Thank you for the compliments as well, Corny. And Gary, you too. Thank you. Thank you for your words. And that's going to be it. Episode 122. Thank you to all our valued listeners, watchers on the streams. You know who y'all are. Have a safe night. I'm Aaron Sorial. Again, with me, Courtney the Burp Brown Sugar Tanner from abroad, and Gary Kittilsen of 3D Boxing Blog. This is episode 122 of the Standing 8 podcast. Have a great night, ladies and gents. Be safe. Peace.